Okay, so like imagine this, you're like this busy property manager, like right in a high rise downtown,
Hmm.
and your tenants are demanding like everything has to be sustainable and you just need something to make your building stand out like something different, and then you find Alvéole.
Interesting.
So today we're going to be diving into Alvéole's web pages
Yeah.
to see how they're making bees like this, bees a compelling business solution for
Yeah.
commercial real estate.
Yeah, it's interesting how they've used their website to tell a story. It's not just about honey, it's about creating these experiences, building community and even like, managing risk.
Right.
And all this through bees.
Yeah. And we've got a lot to go through here today. We've got their homepage case studies, their service descriptions,
Yeah.
even their sustainability commitment.
Mhm.
So like where do we even begin? Like what's the first impression that Alvéole is trying to create?
Well, I mean, their homepage is kind of like, the classic elevator pitch. They
Right.
want to grab your attention immediately, like right away. So they say, connecting people to nature one building at a time. And they,
Right.
they even italicize building,
Right.
just to really emphasize, like, their specific audience, commercial real estate.
Yeah. So right off the bat, like they're not just beekeepers. They're solving a problem
Exactly.
for a specific industry.
Yeah, and that connecting people to nature part is really smart too, because it speaks to like a broader desire for well-being and sustainability,
Oh, absolutely.
which is like a big thing these days.
For sure. So they're tapping into those values right away. But how do they actually like turn bees into a tangible business solution?
Well, that's where their solutions pages are really interesting, because
Yeah.
you'll notice how they frame it. It's not what we do,
Mhm.
it's solutions.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And they break it down into attracting and engaging tenants, reinforcing sustainability, and even a nature-related risk platform.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So they're not shying away from the business side of things.
No, they're not.
It's not just about cute bees.
Exa-
It's about solving real business challenges.
Right. Like imagine you're a property manager, tenant satisfaction's kind of low. You're struggling to meet these sustainability goals, and now your investors are asking about like nature-related financial risks.
Right.
Suddenly bees don't seem so frivolous.
No, they don't. So, but do they actually deliver on these promises?
Uh-huh.
Like, how do we know?
That's where the case studies come in.
Okay.
They've got a whole hive of them.
That's a good one.
And each one is like a mini story.
Yeah.
With, quantifiable results showing how they've helped these different buildings achieve their goals.
Okay. So let's look at a few examples. We've got 5 Houston Center, which is a massive office complex.
Right.
And they actually managed to increase both their occupancy rates and tenant satisfaction.
Yeah, and what's really interesting there is they emphasize how visible the bee program is.
Okay.
It's not just like tucked away on the roof somewhere. It's an interactive part of the building experience.
Right.
They even had a beekeeper on site to like engage with the tenants.
Wow. So they're really creating a buzz.
Literally.
Literally, Alvéole.
Yeah.
And making the building more attractive.
Yeah.
To potential tenants.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. Then there's 757 3rd Avenue in Manhattan, which is a skyscraper that won awards for sustainability, thanks in part to their bee program.
Yeah. And again, they highlight that tenant experience. Like imagine working in that building.
Yeah.
And being able to go to beekeeping workshops or, harvest your own honey.
Oh, wow. That'd be cool.
It's like a unique perk that sets them apart.
For sure. For sure. Okay, and speaking of unique experiences, there's the Residence Inn by Marriott in Calgary.
Oh, yeah.
They partnered with a local brewery to create a honey beer
Oh, wow.
using honey from their rooftop hives.
Now that's local flavor.
I know, right?
Love that example.
It's great. And it just shows how they can tailor their approach to different locations
Mhm.
and create these stories that connect with the community.
Exactly.
So they're not just dropping beehives on rooftops.
No.
They're really like weaving them into the fabric of the building and the neighborhood.
Yeah.
But, I'd be a little skeptical of all these claims. Like, how do they actually build trust and credibility?
Well, that's where their use of client testimonials is really clever.
Okay.
They quote liberally from the case studies.
Right.
And it's not just like nameless praise. They name specific individuals and specific roles,
Gotcha.
which adds a lot of weight.
Right. So, for example, in the CFA's Houston Center case study, they quote the general manager talking about how the bees helped create a sense of place and a sense of ownership.
Exactly.
Like kind of.
And the tone of these quotes is really important too. It's generally enthusiastic. Like they were almost surprised by the positive impact.
Wow.
It feels very authentic.
Yeah, for sure. So they're letting their clients do the selling for them,
Exactly.
which is always more convincing.
Always.
But what about Alvéole themselves? Like, where do we see their personality and values shine through?
Right. Well, that's where their get to know our story page comes in. It's like you get to peek behind the curtain and see who's behind the brand,
Yeah, and it's not just their history or how they got started. They actually lay out their 5 core values. Like, we grow together, we share our passion, we push boundaries, we choose optimism, and we aspire to do meaningful work.
Yeah, and these values aren't just like, empty words. They're really woven throughout the whole website. Like you can see that push boundaries spirit in like how their services have evolved. They didn't just stop at beehives. They created that nature-related whisk platform because they saw a need and an opportunity.
Right, so they're showing they're not just beekeepers, they're innovators.
Exactly.
And that optimism that they talk about, like, it really shines through in their language.
Yeah.
Like, they frame challenges as opportunities. Like, instead of saying urban areas lack nature,
Right,
They
yeah.
say cities are brimming with untapped potential.
Yeah, it's a subtle shift, but it's powerful.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, absolutely. And that ties into their commitment to sustainability, right?
Yeah.
They're not just talking about saving the bees.
Right.
They connect it to the UN's Sustainable Development
That's
Goal.
exactly. And they're not just like writing the sustainability wave or anything. They actually provide like concrete data on how their services contribute to those specific targets.
Okay. So for someone like me who, maybe doesn't speak fluent sustainability,
Sure.
they're not just saying they're doing good. They're showing me how.
Exactly. And they've got the credentials to back it up too.
Okay.
They're a certified B Corp and a member of 1% for the Planet.
Okay. I've heard of B Corp. I'm not familiar with 1% for the Planet. What is that?
So that's basically where they pledge to donate 1% of their sales to environmental nonprofits.
Oh, wow. So they're really putting their money where your mouth is.
Yeah, they are.
Okay. So they're building trust like on multiple levels here,
Mm-hmm.
but they also need to make sure that their message is resonating with different audiences. Right. Because a sustainability manager might care about different things than a potential tenant.
Absolutely. And that's where the website's language gets really interesting.
Okay.
They actually adapt their tone and focus depending on what page you're on.
Oh, interesting. So give me an example.
So like on the attract tenants page, it's all about like differentiation and an ROI.
Okay.
They're talking about how B programs can attract environmentally conscious tenants
Right.
and enhance a building's image. It's very like business focused.
Yeah.
But then you go to the engaged tenants page and the emphasis shifts to like community and experience.
Okay.
They talk about honey tastings, beekeeping workshops, the joy of connecting with nature.
Right.
It's more about creating a positive vibe and a sense of belonging.
Gotcha. And what about for the sustainability folks?
Right. So on the Rainforest Sustainability Strategy page, they're speaking directly to ESG concerns.
Okay.
They use terms like biodiversity, ecosystem services, and nature positive. It's like they're demonstrating their expertise in this area.
Yeah. So they're speaking the language
Yeah.
of business community and sustainability all through the lens of bees.
Exactly.
That's amazing. Okay. So they're not just telling one story. They're telling multiple stories.
Yeah.
Tailored to these different perspectives.
Mhm.
But how do they tie it all together? Like, what's the overarching narrative?
I think the overarching narrative is transformation. They're not just selling beehives. They're selling this idea of transforming these urban spaces into something more vibrant, more connected, and more sustainable.
Wow. So they're taking something as simple as bees and using them to tell a bigger story about the future of our cities. That's pretty remarkable.
It is, yeah. And it makes you think about like your own work or projects. Imagine trying to convince someone of an unusual idea.
Right.
How could you use Alvéole's approach to create a compelling story, build trust, and adapt your message for different audiences?
Yeah. That's something for our listeners to think about. But before we move on, I'm curious about one more thing.
Sure.
Alvéole makes a point of emphasizing the we in their messaging. Like, we grow together, we share our passion.
Right.
Why do you think that is?
That's a great observation. Yeah, it's subtle, but it creates the sense of partnership
Okay.
and shared purpose. Like they're not just saying we're the experts. They're saying we're in this together.
So it's not just about Alvéole and their bees.
Right.
It's about building a community
Exactly.
around this whole idea of urban beekeeping.
Yeah, they're inviting their clients and their audience to be part of something bigger.
And that's a powerful message.
It is.
Yeah, it really is amazing how they've made bees, which some people might think of as a nuisance, into a symbol of innovation and positive change.
Yeah, I think it all comes back to that clever framing. Like they've taken something familiar and given it like a fresh perspective, and tied it to values that really resonate with their audience.
And they've done it without being preachy or over the top. Like, they're not saying save the bees, save the world. It's more like bees can help you achieve your business goals and create a better experience for your tenants.
Right. It's subtle, but very effective.
For sure. And they're constantly evolving too.
Yeah.
Like that nature-related risk platform. That's a great example of how they're staying ahead of the curve
Yeah.
and anticipating what their clients are going to need.
It shows that they're not just about bees. They're about like understanding the bigger picture and finding these innovative solutions to complex challenges.
So like, what's the takeaway here for our listener? Like, what can we learn from Alvéole's approach to brand storytelling?
I think the biggest lesson is just the importance of authenticity and purpose. Like they clearly believe in what they're doing and that passion really comes through in everything they do.
Yeah, they're not just selling a product or service. They're selling a vision,
Exactly.
like a way of thinking about the world. And they're inviting us to join them on that journey.
And they're backing it up with action too, like their commitment to sustainability, the B Corp certification, their work with the UN.
Right.
It all adds up to a story that feels credible and trustworthy.
So it's not just about telling a good story.
No.
It's about living it,
Yeah,
embodying those values in everything you do.
exactly. And that's a powerful lesson for any business, no matter what industry you're in.
Alvéole shows that even something as small as a bee can have a big impact
Yeah.
when you tell the right story and connect it to a larger purpose.
And that's a message that's sure to create a buzz.
Mhm.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listener with a final thought.
Okay.
What seemingly small or overlooked aspect of your work could you reframe, connect to a larger purpose, and build a compelling story around?
That's a great question, something for all of us to think about.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on this fascinating exploration of Alvéole's brand storytelling.
Yeah, it was fun.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.